Help! The sound tore through the quiet morning like shattered glass. Seagulls scattered from the rocks. The waves paused in their rhythm, and Sophia Caldwell's heart nearly stopped in her chest. She was jogging along the private beach her father owned, barefoot now, with her sandals dangling from her hand, when two men suddenly stepped out from behind the dunes. They weren't tourists. They weren't locals. They moved with a dangerous purpose, their faces half covered with scarves, their eyes dark and fixed on her. Sophia's legs carried her instinctively forward, the sand flying beneath her feet. She was 23, the beloved daughter of billionaire Richard Caldwell, and she had grown up in a world where security was supposed to protect her at all times. But here, on this stretch of golden sand, she was alone. One of the men shouted, "Stop running." That was when her foot slipped. She stumbled, the hot sand burning her palms as she fell. Panic clawed at her throat. Sophia tried to rise, but her ankle twisted painfully. The two men closed in like predators circling prey. And then, from the rocks nearby, a figure stirred. At first, Sophia thought she was hallucinating. The man who emerged looked nothing like her world. His jeans were torn, his shirt faded, his hair unkempt. His face was rugged, lined with hardship, and his eyes carried exhaustion deeper than the ocean. But when he saw her, he moved. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask questions. He stepped in front of her like a shield. "Leave her alone," the man said, his voice hoarse but firm. The attackers laughed. "And what are you supposed to be? Another beggar on the beach?" They lunged. The first man reached out, but in a flash, the stranger caught his arm, twisted it sharply, and shoved him down into the sand. The second swung wildly, but the stranger ducked, grabbed him by the shoulder, and threw him backward with surprising strength. Sophia's mouth fell open. She had never seen a bodyguard fight like that, let alone a man who clearly had nothing. The attackers cursed, clutching their bruised limbs. Realizing they had underestimated him, they fled, disappearing into the dunes they had come from. For a long moment, only the sound of crashing waves filled the silence. Sophia was shaking, her chest rising and falling. She looked up at her savior. He was breathing heavily, but his eyes softened when they met hers. You saved me," she whispered, still stunned. He offered his hand, rough and calloused. "Are you hurt?" Sophia placed her trembling fingers into his. His grip was firm, steadying her. She could feel the strength of a man who had endured far more than life should demand. That was the moment she realized. This wasn't just a random stranger. This was a man who had nothing, yet risked everything to protect her. And Sophia's world would never be the same again. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice steady but rough, like he hadn't spoken much in days. Sophia's chest still heaved from the shock. Her ankle ached, her palms stung, but none of that mattered. She stared at him, the man who had just saved her life. His hair was messy, his beard uneven, his clothes worn thin. Everything about him screamed of hardship. Yet the way he stood in front of her was not weak. He carried himself with quiet strength. She swallowed. Who are you?" The man hesitated. His eyes flickered, as though debating whether he should even answer. Then he said simply, "Name's Daniel." Sophia's gaze dropped to the backpack lying near the rocks. It was old and fraying at the edges, barely held together by stitches. When Daniel picked it up, the zipper creaked open just enough for her to glimpse what was inside. A folded blanket, a dented water bottle, and a couple of worn-out books. That was all. No phone, no wallet, no valuables, nothing. "You live here?" she asked softly. Daniel gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Live? I sleep here. Been moving from place to place. Beaches, alleys, park benches. You could say I belong nowhere." Sophia's chest tightened. She had seen homelessness from the safety of tinted car windows, always passing by, always told by her father to look straight ahead. But now here he was. Not an image, not a statistic. A real man, close enough for her to see the lines of exhaustion etched into his skin. His hands caught her attention. They were rough, scarred, but not the kind of scars that came from fights or crime. These were work scars, burns, cuts, old blisters. He had once used those hands for something more than survival. Sophia's voice trembled. "Why were you here? Why did you help me?" Daniel's eyes met hers, calm but heavy with truth. "Because I've got nothing to lose. And because someone needed to." His words landed harder than any shout could have. She had grown up surrounded by wealth, power, and people who only acted when there was something in it for them. Yet here stood a man who had nothing, risking his life for her without asking a single thing in return. Sophia nodded slowly, still trying to steady her breath. Well, then I owe you my life. Daniel shook his head. No one owes me anything. He turned slightly, as though ready to disappear back into the rocks and shadows he came from. But Sophia couldn't let him vanish. Not after this. Something deep inside her, curiosity, gratitude, maybe even a strange sense of connection, pulled her forward. Wait, she said quickly. Can I see you again? Daniel looked at her like she was speaking another language. A billionaire's daughter, asking to see a man who owned nothing but a broken backpack? It didn't make sense. And yet, in his eyes, for the first time in a long time, a flicker of hope appeared. Back at the Caldwell mansion, the walls of glass and marble reflected the morning sun, but inside, the air was tense. Sophia sat across from her father at the long dining table, her voice trembling as she recounted what had happened on the beach. And then, out of nowhere, this man appeared, she said. Dad, he fought them off. If it wasn't for him. Richard Caldwell slammed his hand on the table, cutting her off. A homeless man? Sophia, do you even realize how dangerous that is? He could have been working with them for all you know. Sophia flinched. She was used to her father's commanding voice. It was the same voice that built his billion-dollar tech empire. But this time, his words stung. No, she said firmly. He wasn't like that. He saved me. You should have seen the way he fought. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was protecting me. Richard leaned back in his chair, his jaw tight. Sophia, I've spent my life protecting this family from threats. Wealth attracts danger. That's why we have guards, cameras, gates. And you're telling me you trusted a stranger living on the beach? Sophia's eyes softened. Not just a stranger, Dad. His name's Daniel. And he didn't even want anything in return. Richard frowned deeply, his mind racing with suspicion. To him, people always wanted something. Money, influence, access. Nobody ever gave without expecting a reward. You will not see this man again, he said coldly. I'll double the security detail on the beach. If this Daniel is smart, he'll disappear. But Sophia's heart rebelled. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's weathered face, the way he had stood in front of her without hesitation, the scars on his hands that told stories of a life full of struggle. The next morning, against her father's orders, Sophia drove back to the beach. She searched the shoreline until she saw him, sitting on the rocks, staring out at the endless horizon as though it held answers he'd been searching for. In her hands, she carried a small basket of food. She approached carefully, her sandals crunching softly on the sand. I brought you something, she said gently. Daniel glanced at the basket, then at her. I don't take charity, he muttered, his pride sharp in his tone. Sophia's heart sank, but she didn't back away. It's not charity, she said quickly. It's gratitude. For saving my life. He hesitated, then finally accepted. But what surprised him most wasn't the food. It was the way she looked at him. Not with pity, not with judgment, but with respect. Day after day, she kept returning. At first, Daniel spoke little. But slowly, he began to share. He told her about his life before, how he'd been a carpenter, how his mother's illness drained every cent, how losing his job had left him with nothing but debts and despair. As Sophia listened, her admiration grew. For the first time, she wasn't just the daughter of a billionaire. She was simply a woman, sitting on the sand, listening to a man who had lost everything, yet somehow still carried dignity. The afternoon sun painted the beach in warm gold as Sophia and Daniel walked side by side, the waves brushing against their feet. She had traded her designer dresses for a simple white sundress, blending into the simplicity of the moment. For once, she wasn't the billionaire's daughter. She was just Sophia. Do you ever miss it? She asked softly, her eyes on the horizon. Your old life. Daniel gave a short chuckle. I miss belonging somewhere. Having four walls that were mine. But money? Luxury? No. I've seen men with pockets full of cash who were emptier inside than me. Sophia slowed her steps. His words struck her like lightning. She had grown up with everything. Mansions, vacations, closets filled with clothes she never wore. Yet here was a man with nothing, speaking with a wisdom money couldn't buy. She studied his face. The lines of hardship hadn't erased the gentleness in his eyes. And when he spoke, there was no bitterness, just truth. Around them, the world seemed to quiet. Sophia laughed at one of his stories, a real laugh, the kind she hadn't had in years. She realized she didn't have to pretend with him. He saw her as a person, not as the daughter of a billionaire. But outside their little bubble, whispers began. The Caldwell staff gossiped. The heiress is spending time with a homeless man. Business associates muttered that it was a phase, a rebellion. One evening, her father confronted her again. Sophia, enough is enough. This man, he's dangerous for our reputation. People will talk. Sophia's eyes flashed with defiance. Let them talk. Dad, I don't care about reputation. Daniel doesn't want my money. He doesn't see me as an investment or a trophy. For the first time in my life, someone sees me. Richard was stunned by her conviction, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. This cannot continue, he said firmly. Yet even his threats couldn't stop the feelings that were growing in Sophia's heart. She remembered the way Daniel had stood between her and danger without hesitation. The way he looked at her, not with entitlement, but with respect. And somewhere between their long walks, their quiet talks, and their shared silences, something dangerous had happened. She had fallen in love. Sophia lay awake at night, thinking about him. His voice echoed in her mind. His rough hands, so steady when he reached for hers, lingered in her memory. And she wondered, how could someone with nothing make her feel richer than she had ever felt in her life? The world would never understand it. Her father would never approve. But her heart didn't care. On that stretch of sand, with the waves as their witness, Sophia knew her life had already changed forever. The sun was melting into the horizon, staining the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink. Sophia found Daniel sitting by a small fire he had built from driftwood. The crackling flames lit up his face, casting shadows that made him look both strong and vulnerable at once. She sat beside him quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rhythm of the waves filled the silence, and the scent of the ocean hung in the air. Finally, Sophia turned to him, her voice trembling but certain. You changed my life, Daniel. He looked at her with surprise. How? She swallowed, her eyes glistening. That day on the beach, you didn't just save me from those men. You saved me from something worse. You saved me from a life where everything felt fake. A life where people only saw me as Richard Caldwell's daughter, not as a human being. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his rough hands clasping together. Sophia, you don't understand. I can't give you the life you're used to. I don't have a home. I don't have money. I can't even promise I'll have food tomorrow. But Sophia shook her head, her voice steady and full of conviction. I don't want that life anymore. I don't want the mansions, the cars, the glittering parties. I want someone real. I want you. Her words hung in the air like a sacred vow. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. For years, he had been invisible, just another face in the crowd, another man society had cast aside. And yet here was the daughter of a billionaire, looking at him as if he was the only person who mattered. His walls, built over years of pain and rejection, began to crack. He reached out hesitantly, his calloused hand brushing against hers. She didn't flinch. Instead, she laced her fingers with his, holding on tightly as though she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. You don't understand, Daniel whispered. I've lost everything. I don't know how to love someone like you. Sophia leaned closer, her eyes searching his. Then let me teach you. Let me show you what love really is. It's not about what you own. It's about who you are. And Daniel, you are the bravest, kindest man I've ever met. Tears stung Daniel's eyes. No one had spoken to him like that in years. No one had seen past the rags, the dirt, the brokenness. Until now. The fire crackled, the waves roared softly, and the stars began to appear above them. Daniel finally allowed himself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, he was worthy of being loved. He pulled her closer, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not the smile of a man pretending. The smile of a man who had finally found a reason to hope again. That night, on the same beach where he had once been invisible, Daniel became everything. Not a homeless man, not a stranger, but the man Sophia Caldwell had chosen to love. And sometimes, love like that is worth more than all the billions in the world.